She took deep breaths on the elevator ride up and told her nerves to go to hell. Deep breaths. Find your center. Think murder. She knew her own strength. She only had to believe that she was stronger than he was. The elevator door opened and she keyed into her room. Soft, sonorous music thrummed across the dimly lit living room. A bottle of wine was set on the table with 2 white plates and a black candle. Her heel crushed dark rose petals as she walked toward the bedroom. He would be waiting. "Hello, sweetheart." He stepped out from behind the door and put one arm around her waist. He was warm, and she leaned back into the smell of his cologne. He tugged down the zipper of her dress. He whispered her name as he nuzzled against her neck. She pulled away from him and said, "Dinner first." His eyes lit up. The chase. The game. Of course. She had the upper hand. He would have to raise. They sat down at the table, and she felt a small knot of dread pool in her stomach. "You know the rules." His smile was pointed in the candlelight. She did know the rules. She slid off of her chair and out of her dress. His pants and boxers fell to the floor. He poured her a cup of wine. She poured his. How was work? He wanted to drag out this part as much as he could. The knot of dread in her stomach got larger. She took a drink of wine and tried to remember why she had suggested dinner first. There was a squeezing feeling in her chest. The rules. There was a vague notion in her mind that she hadn't actually made a good move. She climbed down off of her chair and drained her cup. She felt herself slid on the table and then slide across it so she was lying in the center. The sensation always left her fingertips first. Things went hot, then cold, then nothing. He took a sip of wine. Work was its usual. I'm still the CEO, still the big bitch in town. He smirked at that. Of course you are, I made you. The memory flickered in her mind, a drunken night alone praying to someone, anyone, to save her. His arrival. The deal. She told him about her day as candle wax dripped down and pooled beneath her ribcage. She couldn't feel the wax. She couldn't feel anything. Her heart raced as a black bag materialized out of nowhere. She suddenly remembered why she shouldn't have suggested dinner first. How is Jack? Does he still pine after Cole? He's thinking of leaving. He pulled out a scalpel first. Following that were several tools that she didn't know the names for, and a saw. She wanted to get up. She wanted to run. Her finger twitched. You know the rules. You could have avoided this part, but you suggested dinner first. Now you have to finish your play. She didn't feel any of the slices, barely registering the vibration of the saw as he cut away at her sternum. She almost wondered why she hadn't passed out from shock or blood loss. Don't worry, sweetheart. You know what comes next. He lifted the pumping organ out of her chest cavity. The music thrummed quietly in the background. It was like she was outside of her body, like she was a puppeteer with a marionette. She saw herself get off the table and sit in her chair. Her chair was a mess of blood and skin, the inside of her body on display for him. It's almost sad, poor Jack. You know he'll never leave, and he'll never really tell you what goes on between him and Cole. Her heart pumped on the plate in front of her, wet and red. It beat in time with the music. She felt nothing as she sliced into it. He watched as she took small bites, wine-colored stains dotting her arms. The plate was crusted. You remember why we do this, don't you? The same question he always asked. You made a deal. You played the game, and this is the lot you've drawn. She couldn't speak. She had to finish the red mess in front of her if she wanted to win the game. She would win the game. Today, she would win. You can't win. You never do. She would win. She could. She sliced and chewed. Only half the organ was left. Why had she chosen dinner first? Why didn't she remember the grim affair that was dinner? There was only a little bit left. Her eyes began to droop. No, she uttered around the meat in her mouth. She couldn't fall asleep now. She had to finish. You always fall asleep, sweetheart. If you finished the meal, you'd win the game. We can't have that. Her head began to droop. Her hands stopped their constant motion, and she stood from the table. There was only a few bites left. She tried to push herself towards the plate, but her body was no longer hers to control. She turned and walked away from the mess. She slipped onto the couch, and he stood over her. He had turned into shadows, only the outline of the man. I will see you tomorrow, sweetheart. The television played gray static. White noise filled the room. Dark rose petals sidled across the soft carpet. The clock in the kitchen changed to 5:30 a.m., and her eyes opened. She had fallen asleep on the couch. Candle wax had run down onto the table. All that remained were blackened nubs. Her dinner rested on the countertop in the kitchen, a red smear on the plate, and an empty wine glass.